Hey, good morning. My name is Tim Hurley, and I am so excited to welcome you all to our Faith and Education panel. This is a 100% sold-out panel. I think we got the 9 o'clock slot. If y'all looked at the hotel last night, I think there was a lot of socializing and movement building going on. And so I think folks are going to be filtering in as we get started. Our panelists are happy enough to go with it because they know the importance of us building relationships. But I really am excited that it has been sold out for about a week, and so it is going to get crowded, so get ready to squish in as people arrive. My job is to introduce our fantastic moderator, Nicole Baker-Fulgham. Nicole is a Detroit native, an alumni of the Teach for America Los Angeles Corps. She did her undergraduate work at University of Michigan, has her doctorate in urban education and teacher prep from UCLA. She's authored 2 books, including Educating All God's Children, and her latest work is as the founder and president of the Expectations Project. Nicole, it is an honor to have you here. Please join me in welcoming Nicole Baker-Fulgham.
Well, good morning, everyone. So I love that term, movement building. That's what we're calling it now, hanging out. If you all are like me, I definitely stayed up way too late catching up with people that I don't see that often. It's like your high school, college, family reunions all rolled into one. So I really appreciate you all being here so early on a Saturday morning. I am really looking forward to this panel and this discussion. We have some amazing education leaders who are going to talk about really personal sort of values-driven, what drives them to do this work. And, you know, I think for all of us who are here, you probably selected this session because it's important to you as well. You know, one of the things that has motivated me to stay in this work for the number of years that I've been involved in education is definitely my faith. Certainly growing up as a African-American girl in Detroit is a major part of it as well, but my faith beliefs, and I'm a Christian, definitely drive sort of the core of why I do what I do, the belief that every kid has potential, that we're not living up to that, but that our faith really drives us to make the world better and to put those beliefs in action. And I think there are a lot of people in Teach for America over the years who have shared those beliefs. And for those of you who have been around for a while, the organization Teach for America has definitely delved into that a little bit and sort of just tried to understand what motivates a lot of us to do this work and how our faith is connected. And I think it's just a great way for an organization. Obviously, Teach for America does not have any faith, particular faith component to it, but to really respect the beliefs that people have or don't have, and the diversity of those beliefs. I think just a testament to the organization that we're all a part of and our willingness to engage in something that some people may think, oh, wait, why are we talking about that? But I think for those of us in this room, it's very clear and will become even more clear as our panelists get a chance to share their personal beliefs. And this really came out in the feedback that came through when we were, and the team at Teach for America was planning the summit, is that our alumni really wanted a place to talk about the deeply held faith beliefs that we have and how that motivates us to do this work and working for one day for all kids. And there's a lot of places in Teach for America to talk about the what of education and the how to do this work, but there aren't a lot of places to talk about the why. Why am I here? Why do I do this work? What keeps me motivated? And this session is really designed to do that. We are creating this space for education leaders to really share more about how those beliefs drive their action, and our panelists are going to do just that. And what's really great about this panel is that there's a lot of ways to think about who you want to have come into this space. We did a faith and education panel 5 years ago at the 20th Summit, and we took the approach of sort of having outside folks, and some alums, but some outside folks who are leaders in the faith community nationally and around the world, and have them kind of articulate how does educational inequality connect to their faith tenets and their beliefs. What I'm excited, and that was great and I think a helpful introduction, but this is sort of the next level down, I think, is to really find outstanding educational leaders from a variety of sectors, some who are working in faith-based settings, some who aren't, and to really hear from them. Why did their faith influence their choice to work in education was the first question we asked them to reflect on. And the second question is, how does your faith influence your approach to your work? So again, just to be clear, the 2 questions we posed to them, which they're going to share as they come up, is how did your faith influence your choice to work in education? And secondly, how does your faith influence how you approach your work? So I'm very excited to kick things off with our first speaker. And we're going to let them introduce themselves because there are 6 of them. And so they will share a bit more about their background. But I'm going to turn things over to our first speaker today, who is Robert Cook. So come on up, Robert. We moved the slides around here a little bit. Where's Robert? Look, you're getting a preview of all the goodies we're going to hear about.
Close your eyes.
Here we go.
I want to thank the other presenters for allowing me to speak first. Growing up within the Catholic faith when I was younger, there's a scripture that comes to mind where it says the spirit is willing but the flesh is weak. So I felt I was compelled to get up here because you all know what happens when your spirit leaves your body if you get so nervous. So I want to thank everybody, thank Tim for allowing me this opportunity to come up, because it's very humbling to be in a place here in Washington, D.C. with the history of the federal government in the relationship with our indigenous people here in what we call Turtle Island or North America. And having the part of the indigenous culture being a part of the 25th anniversary is certainly humbling to be here, and very humbling to be with these other speakers that have such a deep background in their community and their faith. I wanted to speak to you a little bit about how my faith has influenced me as an educator. And being from the Lakota Nation in South Dakota, we're very much grounded in really trying to understand where we are in this country, and trying to figure out, our identity as this nation's indigenous First People, but also to continue to fight for education, for health care, for land, for protecting of Mother Earth, and that connection of who we are as people to Mother Earth. And that's what really grounds us in our indigenous religions. With over 366 federally recognized tribes in the lower 48, and then another 200 Alaskan villages, and then we have our indigenous relatives in Hawaii that are struggling in a historic movement to gain federal recognition, and what that will mean for their people. It's really has been a struggle to maintain our historical connection to the Creator. Our people are very, what you would call polytheists. We believe in many spirits, spirits that come and define many of our ceremonies as Lakota people. And I can only speak as a Lakota. I don't represent the Navajo Nation, the Iroquois, the other tribes and beliefs that define who they are as indigenous people. Our religion is based on the Chanupa, or the sacred pipe. And our stories talk about how the white buffalo calf woman came to the Lakotas and gave the sacred pipe and instructed our people on 7 ceremonies that are founded on the sacred pipe, or the Chanupa. And so we struggle to maintain the sacredness of that pipe and the teachings of the white buffalo calf woman in our sun dances, in our Inipi, our sweat lodge ceremonies, our vision quests, our making of relatives, our preparing girls for womanhood, the throwing of the ball ceremonies. All of those are ceremonies that we struggle to maintain today, because just in my own generation, in the 60s, the federal government still forbid our people to practice our sacred sun dances. They were held underground. They weren't allowed to be shared publicly. So it was a struggle to maintain that connection to Wakantanka, or the Great Spirit. And then also the really balance of Christianity impacting our people and coming in and really forcing our people to accept a belief that was foreign to who we are and our identity as people. And so it's unique today, because when I do often go back and go to Mass, many of the ceremony can be conducted in Lakota. When my wife and I were married, we had our chanupa on the altar of the Catholic Church so we could share our culture and our spirituality with the guests that came. But my wife and I were also married in a traditional ceremony by a medicine man. I think it's really important, as our core members and our teachers come to our Native communities, to understand the historical struggles of our tribal schools in maintaining spirituality, in that the wo Lakota. Wo Lakota is everything that defines you as a person. It encompasses the emotional, the physical, the behavior, the spirituality. And so in our tribal schools, even though there would be considered public schools, because of the Freedom of Religion Act that protected our Native people, we're still allowed to pray in our schools. So we start off our school day with prayer and with song and with ceremonies. We struggle today because our young people who 93% of our kids who go to public schools are denied their cultural practices, because one of the greatest honors that a young person can get is to receive an eagle feather. And eagle feathers are protected in this country, but under the Freedom of Religion Act, our people can take the feathers and to use them in ceremonies. You can't buy or trade feathers, but you can give feathers. But our young people who struggle with the highest dropout rates, struggle with so many different issues, this is how we honor our young people, giving them an eagle feather. But yet public schools deny them this opportunity because it's going against their tradition. It's going against their way of doing things. But this is very grounded in who we are as Indian people, and I wanted to share that with you. Thank you.
So our next speaker is a 1990 alum. I'm 91, so it's nice to have old school in the house. Is Pastor Ray Owens, and some of you who have been around Teach for America perhaps that long, Ray was on one of the very first recruitment posters ever for Teach for America, so the ultimate poster child. We're going to bring up Pastor Ray Owens and have him share his story.
Hey, how's everybody? Yeah, good morning. I need to begin by saying how deeply honored I am to be a part of this conversation around the many ways that our diverse faith traditions shape and inform our involvement in the work of education reform. I'm grateful for this space where we can openly own our particular faith traditions while addressing our common passion for ensuring the educational excellence for all children. Toward that end, let me take a moment to kind of name my own faith context and then speak to how that context informs and shapes this work. For 10 years, I've served as the senior pastor of the Metropolitan Baptist Church, a predominantly African-American congregation in the Buckle of the Bible Belt, Tulsa, Oklahoma. Yeah, Tulsa's in the house. I view myself and the congregation I serve as situated squarely within what I sometimes call the African-American prophetic Christian tradition. This tradition is thoroughly embedded in the black struggle for racial justice, so that notions such as freedom and justice are not merely political ideals, rather they are deeply religious values. ensconced in both the theological and biblical material of our faith. My passion for K through 12 public education work and working for all kids to have access to an excellent education is derived from my belief that education is inextricably linked to human freedom. To deny someone a quality education is to radically restrict one's capacity to enjoy what I believe is a God-given right, and that is freedom. That is why I've established education as the central focus of our outreach and community engagement work at our church, affectionately known as the Met. Recently, we established a separate nonprofit that we call the Met Cares Foundation. Met Cares seeks to develop high-quality educational options for the thousands of African American students currently attending failing schools. We started this work with the convening of two education reform summits held at our church. We were chosen as one of several cities by the National Ed Reform Organization Stand Up to host these community summits. In these meetings, we were presented with some disturbing data around the educational outcomes of Tulsa's black students. For example, we learned that 45% of black children, nearly 4,900 kids, attend schools that the State Department of Education has deemed F schools. In fact, we realized that there is a 7-school F school feeder pattern neighboring our church. 5 failing elementary schools, all which feed into 1 failing middle school, which feeds into 1 failing high school. So we as a people of faith decided to act. We formed a steering committee of African American leaders who spent a year visiting high-performing charter schools to identify an operator who we believed had the right stuff to replicate their work in Tulsa. The steering committee has since evolved into the Met Cares Foundation, which plans to launch a new charter partner school in North Tulsa in the fall of 2017. Ultimately, our vision is to establish 7 high-performing schools to educate the 4,900 black kids who are currently attending failing schools. So what does my faith have to do with it? My faith as a Christian is what compels me not only to do this work, but to remain with the work when it becomes seemingly impossible to accomplish. While there are many aspects of Christian doctrine that can lead one to a commitment to eradicating inequity in public education, I think it is my theological anthropology that best supports this effort. The doctrine of humanity in the Judeo-Christian traditions teaches us that all human beings are created in the image of the Creator God. And while there are diverse interpretations around what that image entails, in the African American prophetic Christian tradition, there is a focus on the function of this designation over and above the particular form that the image of God takes. Martin King's conception of the biblical principle is representative in a way that I think meets my own understanding of the tradition as well as shared by other African Americans. Basically, King says there are 3 core themes. There's the worth of persons, the unity of humanity, and the concept of freedom. In the interest of time, I just want to deal with the issue of the worth of persons. God's image in each person functions as a declaration of the intrinsically equal dignity and value of each individual before God. Because all persons are equally endowed with sacred worth by God, all persons should be respected equally by other human beings. Hence, any social, political, or economic structure that promotes unjustifiable inequality among persons violates the principle of equal essential worth. So for me, the gross inequity in public education based on a child's zip code or color code or income code is a denial of that child's basic humanity. The extent to which we tolerate and perpetuate this injustice is the extent to which we deny the image of God that our sacred text says is inscribed in every human being. So when I approach the work of doing K through 12 education, I do so out of a sense of call or vocation, a call for the realization that what I believe God intends for all people to be treated based on the equal intrinsic worth implied by the image of God in us all. Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Ray. That was wonderful. Next, we're going to hear from Kazar Hussein, who is currently the Chief of Staff at Two Rivers Public Charter School and has an amazing background. Prior to that, worked in the healthcare field, did some freelancing in, I think, several continents around the world, and he's going to share his personal background and how that influences the work he does at his school.
So as you can probably tell, I'm from Iowa. Iowa is probably more known for agriculture and caucuses, whatever those are. But it was there that I had the foundation of my life and the foundation of my faith. I tell people my identity encompasses three I's: India, Islam, and Iowa. We were the only Muslims in the county. Our house was our mosque, and it was here that I learned about the beliefs and practices of Muslims. That our humble purpose in life was to surrender to a single God and to serve humanity as a result of that. The first word revealed to the Prophet Muhammad when he was meditating on the outskirts of the holy city of Mecca were not believe or beware, but Iqra, read. It was a call to read in the name of the Lord who created you. It was an invitation to use the mind, to ponder, to ask questions, to learn. This is the religious tradition that my parents cultivated in our living room. It is a tradition that had us kiss pencils that fell on the floor and never let our feet touch books lest we defile them. All books, all writing instruments were sacred. It is a tradition where God says that He made humans into nations and tribes so that we may know one another. Learn from others who are different and equal. Social studies in elementary school always had a section on Islam and the Middle East, and I was the one who eagerly volunteered and said, yes, pepperoni is in fact pork, and Muslims don't eat pork not because we are allergic to pork, but because God told us to. Living my Islam in Knoxville, Iowa was foundational to my notion of what it means to be an American Muslim. But we moved to Iowa from inner city Chicago largely because of the school system. And it was the robust public education system that kept us there. It so happens that Iowa's state quarter features education. Grant Wood and the one-room schoolhouse. Many years later, I found myself leading a public health research project in Bangladesh. And during the course of the research, it was obvious that the central cause for high maternal and newborn mortality in that community was a terrible school system. A school system that was failing young girls who would be married off at age 16 or 17 when they could not pass the college matriculation exam. These girls who were undernourished teenagers would get pregnant and have undernourished kids themselves. So it's the school system that robbed them of their potential. And as you know, there's something fundamental about access to education, real education. And education is a ticket to a better tomorrow, not just for the girl, but also the entire family and then the entire village. But I can't be a Muslim talking about my faith and attraction to education without the mention of jihad. Yes, jihad. which, of course, every American in 2016 knows to mean fight the good fight. My faith animates me to fight the good fight. Social justice is fundamental, and the most fundamental lever for justice is education. A jihadi for education. You've probably never heard that at a TFA summit. I'm the son of an educator. I am an immigrant. There is no question that my parents' solid education would, my parents' solid education would not be, I would not be here without my parents' solid education, and my opportunities would be seriously limited. What I learned in rural Chittagong opened my eyes and compelled me to think hard about the fault lines in my own backyard in Washington, D.C. And as divine providence would have it, my public health school colleague helped me find the Education Pioneers Fellowship, which helped landed me a position at Two Rivers. Learning, social justice. Those were factors that attracted me to education and kept my inner fire lit. But there is one more reason, one that has come into sharper focus in recent months. Yeah, I'm compelled to believe that those vying for political power can excite a base of supporters when those supporters have never seen, heard, or smelled a Muslim. What they know of are Muslims, Islam, and jihad. In our rich and checkered past as Americans, we have not often lived up to our lofty ideals. We as Muslims understand that we're not amongst the last and of these victims, which started with the indigenous and the enslaved. But I have faith in this country, just like I have faith in the state of Iowa. But my role through this hoopla, to make myself visible. I don't need to stand my ground or stand and deliver. I just need to be. Because at Two Rivers, there's a premium given for a diverse staff. Because we want to make sure that each kid has someone to relate to. And for that one student, I am happy to play my role. Thank you.
Thank you again for those comments. It was so timely, and for flipping words that we hear so much, and for giving us a new meaning to be a jihadist for education. I agree that I've never heard that, and I just really appreciate your perspective and sharing that with us. Our next speaker, I'm very excited to introduce Shaheen Mistri. She is the founder and CEO of Teach for India. And prior to that, she was the founder of a foundation that works to educate 5,000 children in 15 schools. She's also an Ashoka Fellow and has lots of other accomplishments, and I look forward to hearing her share her perspective with us. Thanks, Shaheen.
So I'm very, very grateful to have been asked to be here, because I've always known that belief and faith, I think, are the most important things in my life. But it took this panel and preparing for this panel to ask myself why and how does belief and faith actually impact my day-to-day actions. And I really struggled to prepare, and I struggled all the way until I actually got onto the long flight from India over here. And then on the flight, luckily, I chose to watch The Little Prince. And The Little Prince reminded me of a quote that used to be my email signature for many months, which says, "It is only with the heart that one can see rightly what is essential is invisible to the eye." And as I was watching the film, and at one point in the film, they take the stars from the sky and grind them because they think the stars are not essential, and they make them into paper clips because paper clips are much more practical and essential. And so I was thinking, what's really essential and what's been essential to me through my life? And I thought back to my faith. I belong to a very small religion called the Zoroastrian faith. And we grew up really only being told one thing again and again and again. Have good thoughts, speak good words, and do good deeds. And I thought about that then in the context of my work, and I said, actually, maybe for me that's what faith is, the belief that I need to have good thoughts, say good words, and do good deeds. And then I simplified that and I connected that to how I see the purpose of education in my last 25 years of being a teacher and working within organizations. And I said, really, the purpose of education connects so deeply to my idea of faith, because it's really about how can I be every day a little bit of a better human being, and how can I do every day just a little bit more good. And at Teach for India, we then sort of called that finding your light. And we tell our children that your role really is to do two things. It's to look for and search for and work for your greatest potential. And then it's to spread that potential beyond and to actually do good for the world more broadly. So then I began to think about how does this actually play out, and I thought I'd leave you with three quick examples of how that idea of faith and belief has played out at Teach for India. The first is in the way that we develop our people, and this is one of our leadership team retreats where we actually got our leadership team to spend 24 hours without money walking on the road, which meant that if people fed them, they ate. If people offered them a place to stay, they slept. We actually all ended up sleeping on the road. But what we were exploring is the faith that the universe can give us, and how do we develop in the thinking about the faith of the universe. So we've done lots and lots of experiments. We call this the commitment to personal transformation. When you join Teach for India, we say this is about you becoming a better professional, but it's much more about each one of us becoming better human beings. One quote that I love, obviously we're deeply shaped in India by Gandhiji, but this is a quote that is my favorite and perhaps you wouldn't have seen. And Gandhiji says, "I am mostly busy making sandals these days. I have already made about 15 pairs. When you need new ones, please send me the measurements. And when you do so, mark the place where the strap is to be fixed. That is on the outer side of the big toe and the little one." And I think about that. I'm thinking this was a man who was planning India's independence movement and put the same level of belief and faith and care and love into the making of a pair of sandals as he did into the freeing of our country. So I think for us, the development of people is very linked with this idea of how can you be good and how can you do good. The second is our sort of goals, and I think we wouldn't be able to have the vision that we have if we didn't have a crazy amount of faith, because we never really know exactly the steps to get there. And to give you an example, this is a shot at our recent planning committee retreat. We're in the process of planning our next 5 years. And today, Teach for India serves 38,000 kids. And we sort of sat with our team, hundreds of people we spoke to, and got together a 51-member planning team, and we said, let's reach in the next 5 years 1 million children, and let's not just reach 1 million children, but let's give them an excellent education. And I know that my team and myself wouldn't be able to credibly, I don't know if we're going to reach that number, but I don't know if we'd be able to credibly and authentically aim for that kind of a leap if faith wasn't a very, very big part of that. We don't know exactly the steps to get to 1 million. We don't even really know exactly what an excellent education is. But our belief is that if we have enough of a sense of possibility, and we trust enough that beyond us there is so much more, that we'll actually be able to get there. And my third and last example is perhaps our most sort of salient idea at Teach for India, and that's just our belief in the individual child and the power of that child. And I just want to end by reading you. This was just the very first draft of a vision statement that one of our groups of children came up with, but I thought it may be a beautiful way to close what I wanted to say. We're 24 children. We believe that each child is a cracker that has potential. We want to be the spark that lights the cracker. We believe that every child is special, and we want to give them the courage and opportunities that they deserve to reach their goals. In this way, they can also spread this education forward, and every child will be educated in the community, the city, and finally, the nation. We want to fill the gap between those who are educated and those who are not. We want to light the spark so that the entire nation is lit up. And that's our kids speaking. And so, yeah, I just want to, again, just end by saying I'm so grateful that this opportunity gave me the ability to make some of those links and leave with even more belief in this idea that faith is so very important.
Thank you, Shaheen. That was just incredibly powerful. I'm excited to bring up our next speaker. Oops. All right, there we go. Stephanie Soroki de Garcia. Stephanie is the co-founder of an organization called Seton Education Partners, and is really a national voice for focusing on ensuring that all Catholic schools are incredibly high quality. And she has also been able to lead other philanthropists in thinking about what that means to support Catholic education through the Philanthropy Roundtable. And she's also a proud mom of 2 little ones, which we were talking about earlier. So with that, Stephanie.
I'm thrilled to see all of you come to this particular session. I'm not surprised. I'm one of 6 kids from a strong Catholic immigrant family. My older brother is a priest. People call him Father What-A-Waste because he's so handsome. Our parents taught us that we are called to use the gifts that God gave us to serve others. It's why I joined Teach for America 18 years ago, and it's what motivates my work today. Like many of you, my time as a TFA Corps member was pivotal. I had graduated from UC Berkeley with a degree in rhetoric. And when my mother would ask me, "What the heck is rhetoric?" I would say, "Don't worry, Mom, I'm going to law school." My time teaching English in the second toughest high school in Oakland changed that. For 2 years, teaching consumed me, and so did my anger. I was angry that some of my 10th graders had never been taught to read. I was angry that 45 classes had no regular teacher for the first 3 months of school. I was angry that when the SWAT team showed up outside my classroom door, it was not considered news. I was angry at the state, the district, my principal. I was angry at myself for every child that I failed. I had no idea what it would be like to fight and fight and fight and only sometimes win. Something else happened during those 2 years. I returned to my faith. As you might imagine, going to Berkeley for 4 years, I questioned so much of the faith that I had been taught as a child. But when I had student after student come to me with problems that no 22-year-old should ever have to solve and that no teenager should ever have to face, I turned to God. I prayed for my students and their families, especially when I could not make it better. I prayed for guidance. Sometimes I prayed for forgiveness. I prayed in private, but what I really wanted to do was talk with my kids about God. I wanted to tell them that even if they had a father here on earth who had abandoned them, they had a Father in heaven who loved them completely and would always be with them. I had no idea how to navigate such a conversation in the context of working in a secular public school. Not being able to talk with my students about God was like teaching with one hand tied behind my back. When I left teaching, I went to Harvard's Kennedy School to study public policy. As a teacher, I could not get beyond my own classroom walls to think about how to solve a broken education system. I wanted to understand how this amazing country of ours could possibly let kids go to the school where I taught, and to figure out what I could do about it. When I graduated from policy school, I took a job working in education philanthropy. And one thing I cherished about working at the Philanthropy Roundtable was how faith-friendly it was. And after Berkeley, Harvard, and even after TFA, being in a place that valued my faith was special. At the Roundtable, we believe that America needs more great schools of all kinds for underserved children. We need more great district schools, we need more great charter schools, and we need more great private schools, including faith-based ones, in order to get us to one day. We believe, like the Catholic Church, that parents should have a right to send their kids to the school of their choice. In this country, if you have money, you have options. You can move to a neighborhood with good government schools, or you can send your kid to a private school. If you don't have money, you don't have the freedom to choose the best education for your child. And the church tells us that as a matter of justice, this is wrong. At the Roundtable, I also learned about the legacy of Catholic schools serving the poor. For 200 years, Catholic schools were the opportunity equalizing force for underserved kids, Catholic and non-Catholic alike. You could say the original Teach for America was an army of nuns who founded and built schools that gave disadvantaged children, especially new immigrants, a shot at making it in this country. How? They respected the inherent dignity of every child and held them to high academic expectations. They provided a strong foundation in core subjects. And importantly, they nurtured in children a deep sense of something greater than themselves. Today, one of the best predictors of whether a low-income child makes it to and through college is whether that child went to a Catholic school. When I left the Roundtable to start seeing education partners, I was not looking to leave. I left because, as one of our panelists said, I felt called. At the time, I'd been talking with Michelle Rhee for 5 years about joining her team, and I thought I might be able to help her. And then I had a conversation with my brother, and my brother said something that has stayed with me. He said, "Stephanie, if you cannot talk with kids about God, you will only get so far with them." And he's right. At Seton Education Partners, we serve 2,500 children, and we are getting amazing academic results. But we're doing something that is even more important. We are helping kids to grow in virtue, and we're helping them to know, love, and serve Christ. We want our kids to make it to college and to heaven. That is the full package. We need more schools of virtue, and I'm not just talking about Catholic schools. We need more Jewish schools. We need more Mormon schools. We need more Baptist schools. We need more schools that are not only academically strong, but that recognize what it truly means to be human, that give kids a good moral foundation in the tradition of their families, that educate the whole child, mind, body, and soul. And the thing is, if you ask the Black and Latino families we serve in TFA, by and large, they want to see more of these schools too. My last note is a pitch. Our organization is growing. I'm going to stay up here at the end of this session. Anybody who is interested in an opportunity, I will stay as long as you want to come. Thank you so much.
I always love a CEO who is not afraid to give a pitch. You know, you got to pitch your organization. That's great. Our last speaker, and then we're going to have all of our panelists come up here after that for Q&A, is Norman Atkins. Norman is currently the co-founder of Relays Graduate School of Education. Shout out for Relay. Prior to that, Norman was also the founder, board chair, and former CEO of Uncommon Schools, which I think folks know, there you go, is one of the most highest performing charter networks. Prior to that, he was also a freelance journalist and has written, I think, for a lot of really cool publications. So I think so. Anyway, come on up, Norman.
Morning, everybody. I don't know that it was my religious background or connection to the Jewish community that caused me to do the work that I do. And I was listening to Reverend Owens talking. I realized that it may be more the black freedom struggle in the United States and the prophetic tradition that he voiced that I heard as a 5-year-old boy, was put on a bus from a white neighborhood to a black neighborhood to go to school, and a sense of brotherhood and community with a wide, diverse range of kids, and being embraced in kindergarten, first and second grade by really strong black teachers, and sort of feeling like I just wanted to give back. I wanted to be part of that community and use education to make greatness for kids. So after college, I headed out for Africa, and I got sort of locked out at the Algerian border, literally incarcerated, and remembered that my grandmother had said, "Why are you going to Africa? You're Jewish. You should go to Israel." So I sensed, this was before Birthright, a free trip to Israel, and I went to Jerusalem. And I'm not sure I became religious there, but my lack of faith was shaken. My lack of faith was shaken, and I became open to my own community's teaching and tradition, and began a journey 30-plus years where I've been trying to learn and grow and develop spiritually. One of the voices that I heard was somebody named Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel. He's famous for having marched from Selma to Montgomery with Reverend King, and he talked about cultivating a sense of radical amazement, a sense of awe and appreciation. And when I look out at Teach for America and see 42,000 core member alums and 8,000 teaching now, and 50,000 people who've been called over the past quarter century to this movement for justice and education, I am radically amazed. Rabbi Heschel also wrote a book about the Sabbath, and he talks about essentially the seventh day being a castle in time. And today is the Sabbath. It's Shabbat, and normally I wouldn't be here. I would be in synagogue looking at our tradition and praying with other folks. And the Shabbat is like a taste of a presentiment of the utopic world that we all imagine and that we work for the other 6 days of the week. It's also the day in which we're supposed to remember as Jewish people that God redeemed us from slavery. And I think about what we're reading in the weekly portion the past few weeks. And about, I think it was 2-3 weeks ago, we were literally reading about the leaving, the exodus from Mitzrayim, from what is now Egypt, with Pharaoh's army chasing us, to the edge of the Sea of Reeds, not the Red Sea, but the Sea of Reeds, and we're at the precipice. And the movie version is that Moses raises the staff and the seas part, but the rabbis teach that it was much more complicated than that. That they got to the sea and the waters were raging, and Moses, the rabbis say, goes off and he prays. He prays a lot, and nothing's happening. And the elders of the tribes, more political, are debating with each other, the 12 tribes, about who should go in first or who should not go in first. And while all of that is happening, there is one person who's barely mentioned in the Bible. His name is Nachshon. He's the son of Aminadav, and he dives in. He dives in first. And they say that the water went up to his eyeballs. You know the old spiritual that the slaves told in this country is a song called Wade in the Water. You have to wade in the water God's not going to part the water until you wade in. And so I derive a lot of lessons from this Nachshon, and I think that this movement does as well. I think there are a lot of people who hear the call. I think a lot of people here who have the courage to dive in first. I think a lot of people here have a sense of the fierce urgency of now, as Dr. King called it, to do it right now. And just in brief, after they get across the water and they go to the mountain and receive the tradition, what I hear in the tradition that moves me to do this work is very similar to what Reverend Owens was talking about, that we are all made in the image of God. And the way Rabbi Yitz Greenberg talks about it is that every one of us, all people and all children, are unique and of equal value and of infinite value. And if that's the case, we have to give our all to all kids all the time. I hear the call, justice, justice we shall pursue, and to love the other as we love ourselves. So for me, teaching is the act of love, and education is the way in which we get redemption and freedom now. And if you'll allow me, I'd like to offer a blessing. I want to bless you, and I hope you'll bless me back. May we be touched by the golden eagle feathers and feel so special as our Native American forebears. May we hear the prophetic call of the black church for justice. May it roll down like thunder, as the prophet Amos said. And may righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. May we be jihadis for education. I love that. And may we make education, schools, classrooms with such love and care as Gandhi made sandals. And may we feel God's love if we're inclined to do so. And if we're not inclined to feel God's love, may we feel loved, an ever-flowing and an everlasting love. And may we be charged forth over the next quarter century to do great work for our children now and always. Thank you.
I saw the journalist in you. That was a perfect synthesis of everything that our speakers shared, so thank you for that, Norman. We're going to transition to a time of Q&A, and we've got about a half an hour, so I hope you'll get your questions ready. We're going to kick off, though, by starting with just a couple of focused questions to the panelists, and then we'll open it up to questions. There are mics on either side, so you can come up here in a couple of moments. So it's interesting. I think we heard from people like myself who work in a faith-based organization, as does Stephanie and Ray, and then our other panelists don't work in organizations that have an explicit sort of faith tradition associated with their work. And so I think for those who aren't in, and my guess would be that for the majority of you here, you are probably also not working in an organization or a school that sort of openly talks about faith. That's probably the norm. So I think given that, I would love to hear from one or two of our panelists who don't work in a faith-specific setting. Are there times that you do, I think navigating that space can be challenging at times if it's a significant part of your identity. And so are there times that you all have found it appropriate to bring faith into the sort of setting of the work you do? Is it problematic? Is it appropriate? I'm curious how you might navigate that, if at all.
I can dive in. So, Two Rivers doesn't celebrate any religious holidays, but believes firmly in religious accommodations. And I feel that I've gotten more kind of awareness about what it means to be a member of my faith in this community than many other secular environments that I've been in, because people are just attuned to what that means for me, and if it's important for you, then the accommodations are there. And so they're like in Ramadan, there's always like, oh, do you mind if I eat in front of you? Well, sure, go ahead. It's happened all my life.
Great, thank you. Anyone else want to respond to that? Okay. So another theme that I think we heard, or just particularly with the summary that Norman gave us at the end, was just the commonality among religious traditions on issues of justice and caring and an ethic of working to serve those who are often the most disenfranchised in our country. So, but again, religion in our country can be a point of tension, and we see ways that the media and others, I think, sort of use that often to cause tension among people from different faiths. So for those of you, or any of you on the panel, could you offer advice or share a lesson you've learned when you've perhaps had to help communities find commonalities among different worldviews, particularly around educating kids, right? Because our schools are a melting pot of lots of different backgrounds. Does that resonate for anyone on the panel?
Okay. So somebody has to speak.
Thanks.
So there is a concept that I appreciate a great deal. University of Chicago theologian David Tracy coined the phrase, the analogical imagination. The idea is that from the position of our explicit faith traditions, in order to engage, the public sphere, the pluralistic society, we need to be able to, embody this sense of an analogical imagination. That is to create, analogy language and categories that help to share our faith outside of the explicit or particular tradition. The person who did this better than anybody I know was Martin Luther King Jr. Martin King could give a sermon at Ebenezer Baptist Church Sunday morning, take that same sermon and deliver it to the press club, to the Jewish Federation, to any given group. But what he was able to do is to use new language which did not, deny the specific commitments of his faith, but he was able to articulate those themes in a way that he could make it open to the hearing of people who didn't share his faith. And I think that's what we're going to have to be able to learn to do if we want to overcome those kinds of the tensions that divide us. So David Tracy says, for some people, the word faith itself is a problematic notion. So what if we talked about a concept like fundamental trust? Which in his mind is pretty much the same thing. We all have some fundamental trust. It may not be theistically motivated, but we have something in which we trust. It may be ourselves, as humanists would say in some situations. So I think it's about being able, and we're smart enough to do this, to craft language and categories and create spaces where we really can have a larger conversation so that those divisions and those tensions don't circumvent the good conversation we all need to have.
Thank you. And there's such power in interfaith collective work, and it's just such a model, right, for how we tackle incredibly difficult problems, because you work on the problem of education inequality, but you're also in the process of learning about someone who has a different faith tradition or has one if you aren't a person of faith, and it's incredibly powerful. Last question, and then if you all can start
Can
lining
I
up.
respond?
Oh, yeah,
Can I
please.
respond?
Sorry, Robert. Yep.
See, I want to be really delicate on how I say this, and excuse me for for using this platform to speak from my position as a Ichewi Chasha, or just a common man. I'm not a medicine man or a spiritual leader by any means. I struggle in trying to live in two worlds as a dual citizen of this country. But it's troubling to me as an American Indian when, with Teach for America coming into our communities, and coming in sometimes with a mindset of being cultural tourists or saviors of our Indian kids. This is not a new concept to our people. We've struggled with the dominant religions in the save the Indian or kill the Indian to save the man, in the assimilation and termination and genocide of our culture. When I talk to the core members that come into our communities, it's so important that we really understand the cultural responsive, and what that means as educators. And prior to coming to Teach for America, I think that was kind of a buzzword. It wasn't really understood or practiced. And I really encouraged our teachers and our communities to embrace culturally responsive teaching. And I started teaching way back, even before Teach for America was even thought of. And being a Lakota, I didn't even think about culturally responsive teaching. It just was something that you did because it made sense. It made sense because the vision and the mission statements of our school is to have our children immersed in the language, culture, and history of being Lakota, but also having an education. With Teach for America coming in and having the really strong focus on academia and getting our kids to college, we were really missing out on the cultural and the community aspects of the holistic education of our young people. And having people coming in and understanding our community and culture was really important, but also be very careful about coming in as cultural tourists and try to be immersed like Lieutenant Dunbar in Dances with Wolves, and going full out into being into our ceremonies and our inipis and our Sundance and that. Those are very sacred ceremonies. And the consequences for not understanding what those mean to us as Lakotas who embrace that Lakota every day. There's not a Sunday where you go and then Monday you're back to whatever. We practice our identity and our spirituality every day, and it's so important that people understand that and be very careful. I was at Institute, and Ezelia, we take sweetgrass or sage, and we use it to to smudge and to kind of get yourself in balance. It's a healing, it's a medicine. And so we were Ezelia, and a non-native core member from Hawaii was with child, and she wrote afterwards that she had read on the internet that sage can cause problems in pregnancy. And it was a terrible experience because that is, our medicines would never ever do something like that. So that the cultural misunderstanding that people have of our indigenous people and to come in, people have to be really careful. And I just want to do that in a very respectful way, that come in culture and be a part of the community in who we are as Native people, but also be very respectful of something that is deep within our people and our communities, and to do it in a very respectful and humble way. I just wanted to share that. I hope I didn't offend anybody.
Why don't we open it up for questions from the audience? We have about 20 minutes. So if you have a question, please come to the microphone and ask, and you can direct it to a particular panelist if you would like. Hi.
Mic on? Oh.
Now.
Is it on? Okay. Well, my name is John Harris III. I'm the founder of an organization called Authentic Reflection. We promote identity development through art processes. It's a faith-based organization where we focus on a campaign called Utopia Campaign to make sure everyone has equal access to food, water, shelter, and love, so that they could actualize their potential. I started it in 2011, and I remember close to when I was about to graduate from Howard, I was accepted into Teach for America, and then I turned down my offer. And everyone thought I was crazy because Teach for America, I guess, had this really amazing brand, and no one was turning down job offers at the end of college. Like, when you're about to graduate, everyone's looking for the job offer. But I finally, after getting turned down by all of these schools that had all these black students and only white educators, and being told that my perspective wasn't what they were looking for, I started to feel like I probably wasn't welcome there. So I decided to pull out of Teach for America. And everybody thought I was crazy. But the school that had accepted me, which was primarily a black charter school in Brooklyn, they said they completely understood my perspective. And so then I stayed out here. I got my own contract as an educator and focused on authentic reflection. And now we do stuff with the White House Initiative, Educational Excellence for African Americans. But what I've noticed is that what creates a dissonance in our communities a lot of times is this focus on culturally biased standardized tests, which tends to be the focus of Teach for America programs. In the communities that I work in primarily, these tests don't tend to relate to anything that they need as far as what it means to achieve in these communities. Grades don't mean anything as it relates to achievement in these communities. If a student's only aspiration is to make it out of their community to another opportunity, being told by someone who looks nothing like them or can relate to their culture in no type of way does not help them achieve. So I was wondering, in what ways could we possibly collaborate in order to make sure that, I guess, the culture of the educational system in the United States of America is more culturally competent for the overall achievement, not just test scores of the students, for people of all colors, races, age, faiths, things of that sort.
Okay, thank you. So it's not exactly what these panelists may be prepared to talk about. If someone wants to give a quick response, and then I think we can take the next question, but does someone have a quick thought on that? It's a very, very complex question. Because we're sort of focused more on the faith component here at this panel, and so it's not exactly. Yeah, Norman, do you want to, since you run a grad school ed, you probably.
I think God could be helpful with this.
Okay, good.
Good morning. I'm Neil Spears. I was a 2007 core member in Los Angeles. It really strikes me the power that's in this room and the power that's on the panel, that people are accessing their faith as a way to apply that to our work in educational equity. So I'm struck also by the fact that there aren't very many spaces like this within Teach for America. There's a recruitment initiative that does some faith work, but there may be some minimal affinity spaces for people of faith, but there's not much else. And so I'm curious to know what you think we as people in this room can do to help activate this power of faith in our work and help connect each other to our values through this work.
That's a great question. Yeah.
I empathize with what you said. I was in the Corps 18 years ago, so I don't know what changes there have been at TFA. One, I don't think you have to wait for TFA to do something. People in this room are leaders, and so you can lead in your own way. I will say, I think not a lot of people know that Teach for America places core members in private faith-based schools in Milwaukee. We have some Milwaukee folks here. I would love to see TFA alumni push TFA to place core members at their own choice in a whole sector of schools, district schools, charter schools, private faith-based schools. We need to think differently about what it means to be a public school. A public school is not just a government-run school. And so I would say that take the lead on your own and also push TFA in that direction.
So I'll just give a quick thought on the organization. So yes, the faith-based recruitment, which I think to some extent still happens, and Tim, it does still happen. Tim can probably share more about that. I would encourage people if it's not a part of your regional, I'm not sure what it's called these days, but when you move to the region as a new core member or having some component, whether it's an affinity group, something that you personally can identify and sort of start that community yourselves. Welcoming new core members who come in with, here a list, if you want to go to a place of worship, here's a list of every religion and every option for you here. The idea of even talking about it with your core members is something that makes it more welcome. I was a 91 core member, and we did this. We found each other sort of informally at Teach for America back in the day, but moving forward and having a real space created by you or Teach for America, I think is really powerful. So I would encourage you to do that as well. Next question.
Good morning. I just wanted to say first, thank you so much for your wonderful contributions and beautiful stories. My name is Camille Loomis, and I'm a current core member in the Mississippi Delta. Yeah, Mississippi. So I think I may be in the minority here in that this public school that I work at is very openly inundated with faith and day-to-day activities of the school, and of course in the lives of our students and staff. So I was wondering, really, if anyone could speak to the sort of navigation between when you're working in a more homogenous religious population, intentionally honoring the faith of the families, but also cultivating a sense of respect for other faith beliefs.
And because of the number of people asking questions, if one person can respond to each question and not multiple panelists, that'd be great.
I was actually thinking for the last few minutes about why I actually think in any situation with any audience, I can talk about what I believe in without thinking about how I say it and how it's going to come across and why I feel comfortable doing that. And I think it's because I really do value the fact that what you believe may be different and I can learn from it, and so I don't have to overthink how I talk about what I believe in, because it's what I believe in, but I also believe it's interesting for other people. It may spark an idea, it may spark a thought. And I'm thinking about why we've become so nervous and attached so many big words and frameworks around how to just talk about what we believe in. So that was just something I wanted to offer out there. I think with children, it's so wonderful. Like, the more they know about different faiths, the more rich they become as human beings. And I think as long as we're careful about not imposing and judging, but truly sharing, because through that sharing and through that dialogue and through talking about the really difficult things, they're growing as human beings and figuring themselves out better and what's important to them. I think that's what I would do. And I would just think a little bit less about how to do it and really stay with the intent. If your intent is, I really want my kids to know about the world and different faiths and what's important and what's common, just believe in that intent and open that dialogue up to them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next question. The briefer you can keep your questions, the more we'll get to.
I'm Michelle. I teach at an Excellence Girls School, which is part of the Uncommon Network. I grew up in the Bible Belt, so we talked a lot about loving on your neighbor, but it wasn't until I went to college in the East Coast where we talked about institutional racism and systemic inequality. And so I guess I know the panel is about faith and education, but can you talk a little bit about bringing in education and social justice in your faith communities?
Well, so in my faith community, there is no divorcing social justice from our commitment to faith, and I think that's a common, configuration in many faith traditions. So, as I was saying earlier, for me, my commitment to justice, and in this case, educational equity, grows out of very explicit faith-based values. Freedom, justice, those aren't political categories for me. They are religiously conditioned. I identify them as present in the sacred text of my faith. And so, in a lot of these contexts, that is not difficult at all. The challenge is, how do we talk about justice, equity, from the place the space of our faith in ways that is not so terribly off-putting to people who don't share our beliefs. I think that's the harder work, and I'm glad Nicole encouraged everybody in their regions to come up with ways to bond around certain affinity groups. One of the things that I enjoy so much being in Tulsa is that we have there one of the TFA Summer Institutes each year. We're trying to keep it there. And each year we get 20, 30 TFA core members who are Institute participants who visit our church the 6 weeks or however long they're in Tulsa, that they are there, and we get to fellowship with them and get to know them, and that has become quite a tradition. So out of that, they begin to, because now they all identify themselves as sharing this, common belief system, they bond around that shared system. So I think we can do that.
Hi, my name is Sarah Micholski-Tipton. I was a 2010 South Louisiana Corps member, and I still work in the rural area in South Louisiana. And my question has to do with, again, that homogenous kind of Christian community that I work in. And I've been struggling with how to push my students forward in their education, given their, I guess, firm belief that God will take care of everything, and therefore maybe they don't need to study or they don't need to push themselves because God will, no, but I mean genuinely, like a genuine belief that it will all just kind of fall into place without the work on their part. And I really struggle with how to deal with that without offending, because I also have a strong faith base. So if any of you could speak to that, thank you.
I mean, I'm just thinking about the value of curiosity and how you can build that in your kids, and just the idea that I want to learn about places beyond where I am. And I think I often ask myself, like, what am I actually preparing kids for? Am I preparing them to be successful family members, community members, country, or global citizens? And I think the answer is an and of all of those things. And so the more we can just develop curiosity, that like, yes, what I believe in is really important, understanding it is really important, understanding my community, but also understanding someone completely on the other side of the world and what they think and what's different about what they think, and then relating that back to me and my thoughts. I would just give kids lots of projects and ideas that really build that value.
I wonder if you can talk to the I mean, I had kids when I was teaching in Oakland invite me to their churches all the time, even though they weren't, and I would go. And I just wonder if you could talk to the pastors who might actually be in a great position to say, actually, that's not what our faith teaches us.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yes.
Hello, I'm Sunjata Salam, and I work at Freedom Prep Academy in Memphis, Tennessee, also in the Bible Belt, which apparently a lot of us in the Bible Belt are having some issues quite a bit. The question I have, though, is interesting because we've talked a lot about our students, right, and how to bring faith and education with our students. But my thought is, how do we as teachers and leaders get to the conversation that Robert was having with each other, right? Because oftentimes we decide, especially when you're in a minority tradition, a tradition that is not the majority tradition, we don't bring ourselves to the table because we're afraid that we might disrupt the Judeo-Christian understanding of the world. And so how do we get to this place where this is a very important part of me? Clearly, I'm wearing a red fez, and everyone is looking at that and thinking, what does that mean, right? And so this is a very important part. And myself, I am a minority in a tradition as well. So my understanding of Islam is very different than the traditional understanding of Islam. So how do we bring, I said all that to say, how do we bring ourselves to these conversations with adults in a way that is valuable and allows us to continue to be our whole self?
So speaking personally, we've met before. I'm dying to hear your story and your perspective, and what I find among colleagues and organizations where I've worked, and just the general blue state culture where I live, that people are so uncomfortable talking about God and religion and hearing other people talk about it. Like, I have a colleague who flips out when he hears somebody's message that says, "Have a blessed day." And so, you know, when you invoke God or when you invoke blessing, it can make a lot of people uncomfortable. And I think we probably, in our, especially our public schools and organizations serving public schools, where the religion is the separation of religion and state, for lots of good reasons, we've sort of failed to introduce this conversation, and we need to get about talking about our religious selves in the same way that we're talking about our cultural selves and our racial selves and our identities, and we need to get those conversations to happen frequently with a lot of love and understanding so that we can get to know each other, because I can't get to know you unless I know that part of you.
Right.
And we need to do that as adults and to get right with ourselves before we can start to go out into our communities and share that with our kids.
Absolutely.
I think we have time for probably one more question, 2 more questions.
I'll try to make it a good one. All right. My name is David. I grew up a son of a Southern Baptist preacher, so that is a core part of my identity. And I teach students in Brooklyn at an uncommon school. I teach a student named Jeshron who, whenever he gets frustrated, he starts quoting the Lord's Prayer to himself. So it's an important part of my students' identity as well. And so for the teachers that have taught, or the panelists that have taught before, I'm struggling with balancing being my authentic self in a classroom and responding to my students' authentic culture. That includes a huge faith component, and also knowing that I'm in a public charter school where those conversations aren't supposed to happen in the classroom. And I feel like it's impacting the way I teach, the comfort and confidence I feel in the classroom, because there's a part of me that I can't find a space to share. So practical ways to navigate that would be very helpful.
Let your students lead. So honor who they are. They will bring that to the table, as you've seen. And so let your students lead. I think I was not comfortable for 2 years. It was so hard. And so I think one thing everyone in this room can do is actually start getting comfortable with that part of who you are. And if every single person in this room got comfortable with that part of who you are, it will help move the conversation. Check out Brea College Prep. Which is a very faith-friendly, secular charter school. It does not break church-state boundaries, but it is a place that, if you are a person of deep faith, that will be welcome and celebrated.
I think you have to make a full 2-year commitment. I mean, in our communities during the summer, that is where you can make your impact with students. But for so many of our core members, and for good reasons, you have family and things too, but I think to build those relationships in the community, you have to have a full investment of time, resources, energy. And for my biggest impact on students throughout my career, well, obviously I'm from my community, but was during the summertime. And we lose a lot of that opportunity when we go. So it's about building relationships outside of the classroom.
Unfortunately, we're out of time for questions, but I'm sure the panelists will hang around if you have specific questions. And I feel like this shows me, and I think all of us, that there is such a need for more of this dialogue, and just really for those of you who are still teaching, like the last question, the practical strategies of what do you do, how do you navigate all of this, and how do we encourage all of our collective faith communities to really be more invested, if they're not already, in this idea of one day and working collectively, because there's such power here. As just a little plug for a tool, which I have nothing to do with, National Geographic, the National Geographic Channel has a new documentary series coming out narrated by Morgan Freeman called The Story of God. And it's really looking at his journey going around the world and looking at all the different religions, the tensions, the lessons, what their core beliefs are. They also are developing a series of education tools. So for those of you who are still in the classroom, it could be a powerful resource if you want to start to have these broader conversations with your students on different views and different belief systems that may be out there. So with that, I just want to hugely thank our panelists and our speakers for joining us. And thank you to Tim, our staff liaison, for putting this together, and to all of you for coming and bringing truly who you are and your authenticity to this conversation, and may it continue. Have a good rest of the day.